So next I would like to introduce Father Michael Sweeney, member of the Order of Preachers and president of the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. Also the co-founder of the Catherine of Siena Institute, which equips parishes for the formation of lay Catholics. Father has experience as a pastor, university chaplain, university educator, and has developed workshops on numerous topics, including Catholic social thought, the Second Vatican Council and the role of the laity, and theology, indeed, of the laity. Father also serves as a consultant to the California Catholic Conference. It's a pleasure. We have many Dominicans working at Ave Maria University, so this is kind of a pleasure for me to meet you and join me in welcoming Father Sweeney.
I was asked to speak on the family and the Church's social teaching. We've heard already several presentations, and what I would like to do is pull out a couple of things that I think are essential. Chesterton, one of my favorite authors, once said that there are three extraordinary things: an ordinary man, an ordinary woman, and their ordinary children. He was alluding, of course, to the ordinary family. But I suspect in this day and age that even a majority of our contemporaries, including Catholics, would sincerely wonder what he's talking about. Our social imagination tends to regard a man, a woman, and a child as discrete entities which can exist in a multiplicity of possible relationships, many of which are called family. What can possibly be extraordinary about that? Now, the whole social teaching around the family, it seems to me, can be summed up by insisting that there is a community that founds the social order, and which therefore can be said to be extraordinary in that it transcends every other. Now, to get at what difference this makes, it seems to me, I would like to take a moment and use Charles Taylor, his Secular Age, in order to see where and how very, I think, countercultural this view of family that we have is. And so, Taylor talks about social imaginaries, and so not philosophical principles, but rather we vote and marry and buy and so on according to the way we imagine society to be. And so he speaks of social imaginaries. He would quote, "What is a social imaginary? A sense of normal expectations we have of each other, the common understanding that enables us to carry out the collective practices that make up our social life." A social imaginary, in other words, would answer or perhaps be framed according to the formulation, everybody knows that. And so what does everybody know about marriage? Taylor holds that we've come to imagine society, I think he's right here, to be an economy. In other words, that individuals relate intentionally to each other for the sake of an exchange of benefits. Such exchange can be public or private. And so, applying Taylor, we can see that it has, I think, become customary to imagine that family belongs to the private sphere, where individuals enter into voluntary relationship for the sake of an exchange of benefits, the sharing of a home, fulfilling needs for intimate relationship, for the desire to obtain and care for children. Some permanence in relationship is imagined, if it is marriage, but marriage is regarded as a contract that can be easily nullified if it ceases to fulfill the perceived needs of the parents. And so I think if there's a common way of thinking of marriage right now, especially all the time manifested in the media, this is it. So belonging to the private sphere, familial relationship has no formal place in governance. In public life, the fact that someone is married or a parent is not pertinent to his or her place in the state. We tend to imagine the relationship of the individual to the state as direct and unmediated. There is little room, I think, in our social imagination for subsidiary societies such as the family. Notice these are imaginary categories, and this is what is most troubling. Can we imagine subsidiary relations? Not make the philosophical case for them, but can we imagine them as a culture? Now, by the way, given, I think, that a good working definition of a totalitarian state is one in which there are no subsidiary societies, and that society is therefore imagined to be coterminous with the state, our social imagination tends toward a totalitarian state. I think the one bulwark against a totalitarian regime is to imagine, again, that there can be a robust defense of the rights of the individual. And since in many cases the best defense can be a good offense, new individual rights have been promulgated, most especially and controversially the right to privacy. And so marriage is imagined to be a private relationship between individuals who remain individuals. Now, given the manner in which many of our contemporaries imagine the family, the situation of children is rendered somewhat perplexing and, frankly, relatively little regard is paid it. Given our technological sophistication, sex has been, of course, severed from marriage, and children tend to be regarded as a right of individuals who choose or do not choose to have them. Work is progressing according to which it may soon be possible to determine intelligence and other traits by genetic manipulation. Until their legal maturity, the relationship of children to society remains mediated by their parents or caregivers, although the state more and more intervenes through the regulation of education, healthcare, access to abortion, and similar legislation. Consistent with an imaginary according to which individuals relate directly to the state, it is becoming the case that we imagine the state to derogate authority over children to parents until the age of legal maturity. This, I believe, has been specifically articulated in several states. The parents stand in the place of the state for the sake of the children for a temporary time. All said, a secular social imaginary affords very little room for a consideration of the family. And so, with this in mind, then, how does the church regard the family, and how is the case to be made for the family? I think these are related. Before outlining the Church's social teaching briefly, I'd like to offer two caveats. The first is that the Church's teaching should not be construed as a traditional view of marriage. If by traditional, or marriage and family, if by traditional we mean the manner in which marriage and the family have been imaged for the last several hundred years. Our customary understanding of marriage has taken more from Locke and Grotius than from Revelation. And the articulation of the family in Catholic social teaching is relatively recent. Arguably, the first articulation dates to Pope Leo XIII's encyclical Arcanum Divinae Sapientiae, published in 1880. The second caveat, the social teaching on marriage and the family is still very much a work in progress. And one of the things I'd like to do is indicate, I think, where more work is urgently to be done. As Bishop Cantu indicated yesterday, the Church's reflection upon the family begins with her understanding of the human being. So St. Thomas Aquinas insists that as an individual subsistence of a rational nature, of course from Aristotle, the human being is a person, which is what is most perfect in the whole of nature, such that one human soul is of greater worth than the whole rest of the material creation in combination. The Second Vatican Council, and especially the Magisterium of St. John Paul, illustrate this further. The human person is the only creature that God created for its own sake, and each human person is a unique and unrepeatable manifestation of the human mystery. There never has been before, and there never will be again you. Here the implication is that the person is like God, in whose image he is created, not only according to her rational nature, but also in her very uniqueness and unrepeatability. While sharing a common nature with all others of the species, in relationship with God, each person transcends the whole social order which exists for the sake of the person. The dignity of each person is inalienable because it is founded ontologically and does not depend upon social ratification or recognition. So the church on the person. Sharing a common nature with every other human being, the person is not merely a social being, but inhabits a community of persons. This says more than simply that the person is social. To be a person is to be related to others for the reason that the self-realization of the human person requires that she be loved and cherished for her own sake and in her proper uniqueness. This is something that our society, of course, completely overlooks, ironically, because of its emphasis upon the individual. For this reason, each person born into the world requires an education which is not merely directed to a productive life in society or to the responsibilities of citizenship, but to the whole realization of her personality in all of its dimensions. This is something, again, I think that requires further elaboration. What exactly does it mean that the person realize the fullness of her own potential? This has to, I think, be unpacked. At the very least, we must say that the education of the human person is an act of love, according to which the person is named in her destiny in such a way that the unique and unrepeatable work through which she will be expressed is fostered and enabled. Now this, when we talk rather vaguely about human flourishing, I think this is what we mean. This community of persons into which the human person is born is the family. The family, like the person, is of divine origin and is instituted by God through creation itself. In the words of St. John Paul, the family is the preeminent, most favorable, and irreplaceable place for the recognition of personal being on its way to complete dignity. And so the family is founded upon the marriage covenant, which, according to St. John Paul, is a communion of persons. Here again, more work is to be done, for while it is clear that marriage is ordered to the family in such a way that it can be neither understood nor adequately appreciated apart from the family, the relationship that pertains between marriage and the family has not yet, I think, been sufficiently articulated. Let's see what we have on this. Pope Leo XIII insisted that marriage is, from the beginning, and in every society, a sacred institution. And so, quote, "Marriage has God for its author, and was from the beginning a kind of foreshadowing of the incarnation of his Son. Therefore there abides in it something holy and religious, not extraneous but innate, not derived from men but implanted by nature. Innocent III, therefore, and Honorius III, our predecessors, affirmed, not falsely nor rashly, that a sacrament of marriage existed ever among the faithful and unbelievers. The marriage of two unbelievers is, he says, a sacrament. Marriage is holy by its own power, in its own nature, and of itself. At the heart of marriage, St. John Paul teaches, is a total self-gift of the spouses, each to the other, which gives over to a community of life and love, a communion of persons, which seeks manifestation in the co-creation with God of children. Every Catholic, or it used to be the case, maybe many Catholics are now aware that if there is an intention against children, there is no marriage. This must mean that there's something lacking in the face-to-face relationship of the couple. It's this that needs unpacking. What is missing to their relationship if together they do not seek children? This communion of spouses situates the children born of their union, and through their children, they bestow upon each other the dignity and office of father and mother. Marriage is a vocation in that the spouses are called into this relationship by God himself. By the way, Christian or not Christian, Catholic or otherwise. Accordingly, it is not possible to conceive of marriage apart from its sacred character. Again, Pope Leo XIII, every true marriage is in itself and by itself a sacrament. And nothing can be farther from the truth than to say that the sacrament is a certain added adornment or outward endowment which can be separated away from the marriage contract. For Pope Leo, a civil marriage is an oxymoron. Now, what we have, therefore, in the sacrament, the Christian sacrament, in Christ, marriage is revealed in a further dimension. And so a relationship that is already sacramental, already holy, is revealed further. This further revelation is that marriage itself is an image or a type of the relationship of Christ to his bride, the church. The claim of the revelation is that every marriage seeks its fulfillment is ordered to the communion whereby the church is constituted. For this reason, the family is called the domestic church. The family, like the church, is founded upon the self-offering of Jesus, which in marriage is sacramentally incarnate in the self-offering of the spouses. For this reason, the family interprets the society that is the church, and the church reveals the society that is the family. Now, the claim here is that this is true of every family, or of every couple, that this is something that they themselves necessarily seek in their face-to-face relationship. I think that, and in preparing young people for marriage, that this is what they seek. Is if that is at the forefront, then we prepare them well. If we expect of them that they have a natural relationship that we rather hope might mature someday into something else, and look merely at their compatibility, which is the case of most marriage instruction, then we betray them. Now, what has been too little remarked in the social teaching is that one of the fundamental principles of the social teaching, the fundamental principle perhaps, the virtue of solidarity, is revealed in and through this communion of persons, and that is the family, and is founded upon it, inasmuch as the couple who marry are not merely directed to each other, but seek the union itself that constitutes the family. Marriage occurs when a couple seeks the union, and they love the union, even as they love each other. This, I think, has been something that we've maybe overlooked. And so, Pope St. John Paul, the spouses participate in marriage together as spouses, so that the first and immediate effect of marriage, the res et sacramentum, is not supernatural grace, but the Christian conjugal bond. This is why, too, the Church presumes always in favor of the bond. If the sacrament is present, the union itself of the couple is loved and sought. Now, here I'm indebted to the insight of Russell Hittinger. Solidarity, in its most profound manifestation, is not merely a disposition of charity towards others, but is a habitual affirmation of union with others. This is solidarity. The communion of persons, it is a family born of the communion of the spouses, is in this sense the first cell of society. Because solidarity with others is at the foundation of the whole social order. And it's in this manner that the centrality of the family to society is ontologically founded. Solidarity is unthinkable apart from the relationship that is the family. From this, it clearly follows that the family, situated at the foundation of the social order, is prior to the state and to any other society save alone the church, both in time and in dignity. Accordingly, the family also grounds the principle of subsidiarity. I'm indebted to Patrick Brennan for pointing out to me, and this had never occurred to me, that according to our social imagination now, solidarity tends to be regarded as a recognition of societies or associations that are subsidiary to the state in such a way that the state should derogate authority to these societies and associations. This is apparently the manner in which solidarity is now thought, such that these associations would have no authority apart from the recognition of the state, that solidarity is a state derogating authority to more immediate jurisdictions. Rather, the opposite is true. The principle of solidarity insists that authority properly resides in the more immediate and therefore more fundamental societies, the family being preeminent among them, in such a way that the failure of the state to respect more immediate jurisdictions undermines society itself. And so the claim of the family upon society is analogous to the claim of a parent upon a child. The state, for that matter, society itself, is derivative. Accordingly, the family itself must be seen to be a subject of rights, and the Charter of the Rights of the Family was issued by the Holy See on the 22nd of October 1983. Again, this is a work in progress. To speak of rights in the family, I suppose, is necessary in this day and age because that's how we frame everything. In a certain sense, it's more elegant to do without it, to look instead at the relationship itself. However, I think that in this day and age, we require this, in a certain sense, counter to the way normally we think. Now, because the family exists prior to the state or any other community, the rights the family has are inherent and inalienable in that they flow from the responsibilities inherent to the family itself. Specific rights include the education of children. Parents have the first right to educate their children in conformity with their moral and religious convictions, and the right to the assistance of society in their performance of that function. When education is undertaken by the state, the parents retain the right to supervise the education of their children, especially, again, in matters pertaining to their moral and religious convictions. This is a right. The support of public authority, another area of rights. The principle of subsidiarity, again, in its fundamental articulation, public authorities must respect and foster the dignity, lawful independence, privacy, integrity, and stability of every family. There are economic rights claimed. The right to economic conditions which assure the family a standard of living appropriate to the dignity and full development of its members. The right to private property and to inheritance. The right to remuneration for work adequate to sustain the family, even by such means as a family wage, family allowances, or other social measures. The right to adequate housing that protects the integrity of the family. And then there are rights of immigrants, migrants, and refugees. So, to the respect of their culture, their integration into the larger community, and a right to maintaining, of course, the integrity of their families. Central, therefore, to the teaching on the family is a realization that this communion of persons, that is the family, is foundational to the whole social order, because of the very nature of the human person, whereby a person is a being in communion with other persons. The full development of the person requires that she be called by name by those who love her for her own sake and in her proper uniqueness and unrepeatability. And paradoxically, as Bishop Cantu pointed out yesterday, this necessarily implies that no one can be recognized as an individual apart from communion with others. Society cannot be conceived apart from a recognition of and insistence upon what is common to persons. An I is inconceivable apart from a we that precedes it. For this reason, again contrary to our secular imagination, the individual cannot be considered to be the first unit of society, and in fact, unless we begin our consideration of the social order with the assertion of communion and community, we are unable, I think, to retrieve what is common either in thought or in fact. It's my conviction that the majority, we have no imagination any longer for what we mean by common. And so a common good disappears from view altogether necessarily. By common, of course, we mean something that applies to everyone and therefore necessarily to each. Now, I suggested at the outset the elaboration of the social teaching is very much a work in progress. If in our social imaginary the individual stands at the center of the social order, and I think that is the case, then the significance of the family is entirely lost from view, and more drastically, we haven't imaginative categories to deal with it. Given that we're all of us influenced by the culture that we inhabit, I think the significance of the centrality of the family is difficult even for Catholics to hold in mind, and I want to offer a couple of applications. First, while the ontological dependence of society upon the family is expressed in the documents of the social teaching explicitly. For example, in the compendium of the social doctrine of the Catholic Church, the family is treated only after an elaboration of the fundamental principles of the social teaching, and so the dignity of the person, the common good, solidarity, subsidiarity, suggesting that they can be derived apart from a consideration of the family. I think a much better order would be to present the person in the Church's understanding, then necessarily the family, and showing that the family then grounds the principles of the social teaching. This would be, in fact, more consistent with what we in fact say about the family, but we don't quite practice it. Even though the Charter of the Rights of the Family situates considerations of abortion, contraception, and divorce and remarriage under the rubric of the rights of families, in our public discussion of these issues, we have tended to treat them under the rubric of sexual ethics, with a focus upon individual morality, apart from a consideration of the family, with the, I think, unintended consequence that the instruction appears to be abstract and arbitrary even to Catholics. Then the relationship of marriage to the family has not been sufficiently taught, with the result that Catholics and others are helpless to give an account of the social significance of marriage. This, of course, is proceeding at this very moment. And then finally, issues around marriage and family have been politicized, and the Catholic community has been somewhat complicit in this, trying to defend so-called traditional marriage. But marriage has been spoken of according to political characterizations, such as progressive or traditional, liberal or conservative, so that the fact, again, of a community of persons, the family, is entirely overlooked in this discussion, despite the fact, by the way, that the consummation of marriage, or the act of it, I've been assured by those who know, renders it difficult to distinguish liberals from conservatives or Democrats from Republicans. Some of this wants satire. And so, contrary to our social imaginary, in conclusion, the family is an institution divinely ordained, which is public, not private, is founded upon the communion of persons that is achieved in marriage, which is the free, total, and irrevocable self-gift of the spouses, each to the other, not a contractual exchange of benefits between individuals, as it is normally thought. The family is the ontological foundation of the entire social order, and therefore prior in dignity to every other society, and in this manner the first unit of society. The family is the ground of solidarity and of every other social virtue. The family is the guarantor of subsidiarity in the political order, and as such is a subject of inalienable rights. I think we can sum up the whole by saying the family is the measure of the whole social order, such that whatever advances the family is judged to be a social good, and whatever harms a family is judged to be a social evil. Thank you.